I always believed I married the love of my life. For 7 years, Jake, 33M, and I, 32F, built a happy life together, 2 kids, a beautiful home, and what I thought was a strong, loving marriage. He was my best friend, my rock, and then, a single letter shattered everything. Jake has an identical twin, Ryan. From the moment I met them in college, I could tell they were nothing alike. Jake was the responsible one, the guy who helped me study and brought me soup when I was sick. Ryan? He was the reckless, party-loving twin who always had a smirk that made me uneasy. But I never imagined he would ruin my life. A few weeks ago, I was cleaning out the attic when I found a small wooden box tucked inside an old suitcase. It wasn't ours. I'd never seen it before. My curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it. Inside were a few random trinkets, an old watch, and a folded-up piece of paper. At first, I thought it was just some forgotten note, but as I read it, my hands started to shake. It was a letter from Ryan. Jake will never tell you the truth, but you deserve to know. On your wedding night, you weren't with him. You were with me. I froze. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The rest of the letter was a drunken confession, written just a month after our wedding. Ryan claimed Jake had been so wasted at our reception that he passed out before we even made it to the honeymoon suite. And Ryan, being the asshole big brother, his words, not mine, thought it would be hilarious to take his place. I felt sick. My mind flashed back to that night. I remembered how Jake, no, Ryan, had acted strangely, but I chalked it up to nerves. He didn't say much, and when he kissed me, something felt different. But I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and, God, I hate to admit this, a little tipsy myself. I never questioned it. And now, 7 years later, I was reading the truth. I couldn't breathe. I clutched the letter in my shaking hands and did the only thing I could think of. I want to find my husband. I stormed downstairs, gripping the letter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Jake was in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware that our entire marriage was about to change. Jake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up and smiled. Hey, babe, what's up? I couldn't speak. Instead, I shoved the letter into his hands. He frowned, then unfolded it. As his eyes skimmed the words, his expression shifted, from confusion to shock, then something else. Something like guilt. I watched him, waiting for him to laugh it off, to tell me Ryan was messing with me, that it was some kind of sick joke. But he didn't. Instead, he swallowed hard and set the letter down carefully on the counter, like it was a ticking bomb. Where did you find this? He asked, his voice unnaturally calm. In the attic, I shot back. It was in a box I've never seen before. But that's not the point, Jake. The point is this true? Silence. My heart pounded. Jake. He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing shallow. I don't know. I blinked. What do you mean, you don't know? He exhaled sharply, finally looking me in the eyes. I was really drunk that night. I don't remember a lot. But a few years ago, Ryan said something, jokingly, about that night. I never asked him to clarify because I didn't want to know. I felt the room spin around me. You had suspicions? And you never told me? What was I supposed to say? His voice rose. Hey, honey, there's a small chance my twin might have taken my place on our wedding night. I didn't want to believe it. I thought he was messing with me, and I didn't want to put that idea in your head if it wasn't true. I took a step back, my stomach churning. So you let me live a lie? You let me build a life with you while Ryan, my voice broke. I couldn't even finish the sentence. Jake's eyes softened. Baby, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. Tears blurred my vision. But you suspected. And you still let me believe I had the perfect wedding night. That I was with my husband. That the father of my kids was the man I thought he was. Jake's face paled. You don't think? I don't know what to think, Jake. My voice cracked. I don't even know if my kids are yours. His face twisted in pain. Don't say that. I shook my head. I need to know the truth. He nodded slowly, but I could see the fear in his eyes. How? I swallowed hard. A paternity test. And then I'm calling Ryan. The weight of my words hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about our past. This was about our future, and I had no idea what I was about to uncover. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every moment of my wedding night, searching for signs. Anything that could have told me I was with the wrong man. But nothing stood out, and that terrified me even more. The next morning, I scheduled an at-home paternity test for our 2 kids. Jake didn't argue. He looked hollow, like a man holding his breath, waiting for his world to shatter. But I wasn't done. I needed to hear it from Ryan himself. I didn't tell Jake I was going to see him. I just got in my car and drove. Ryan lived about 30 minutes away, in a condo his parents had helped him buy after his latest failed business venture. He was the type of guy who never had to face real consequences, always shrugging things off with a grin and a beer in his hand. But when he opened the door and saw my face, his smirk disappeared. "Lena," he said, his voice wary. I pushed past him into his apartment, my hands shaking with rage. "Tell me the truth." Ryan sighed, rubbing his jaw. "I was wondering when you'd show up." That alone made my stomach drop. "So it's true," I whispered. He hesitated for just a second too long. Then, he nodded. "Yeah, it's true." The room spun around me. I grabbed the back of a chair for support. "You son of a bitch." "Lena, it wasn't." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. You stole my wedding night. You violated me. And you let me go on thinking my husband was the man I was with that night." Ryan exhaled, leaning against the counter. "Look, I was drunk. Jake was drunk. It was supposed to be a prank." "A prank?" My voice was barely above a whisper, shaking with fury. "That's what you call it?" "I didn't," he stopped, shaking his head. "I didn't think it would go that far." "You didn't think?" I laughed bitterly. "You took my husband's place, Ryan. You slept with me. That's not a prank. That's sick." Ryan swallowed hard, his face pale. "I know. And I was going to tell you." "When? After I had kids? After I'd spent years building a life with Jake?" I shook my head. "You let me live a lie. You let Jake live a lie. And now, I don't even know if he's the father of my kids." Ryan flinched at that. "Lena, if there's a chance the kids are mine, I want to know." I stared at him, disgusted. "You don't get to say that. You lost any right to be in my life. Or there's the moment you did this." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I swear, I never meant for it to get this far." "Yeah? Well, it did." My voice was ice. "And now, I'm going to make damn sure you pay for it." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I drove home, my mind raced with what to do next. No matter what the paternity test said, my marriage could never go back to what it was. The life I had built was already crumbling around me. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I could ever look at Jake the same way again, whether he was the father of my kids or not. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but no matter how hard I tried to steady my breathing, I couldn't. Ryan's confession played in my mind on repeat. I had spent 7 years sleeping next to a man, loving him, trusting him, only to find out that the foundation of our marriage had been built on a lie. Jake was waiting for me when I got home. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept all night. "You went to see him," he said quietly. I dropped my bag onto the counter, barely able to look at him. "Yeah." Jake swallowed hard. "And?" I turned to face him, feeling an anger I had never known before. He admitted it. Jake closed his eyes, his hands balling into fists. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "I swear, Lena, I didn't know. I swear on our kids." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't bring them into this. We don't even know if they're yours." His face twisted in pain, but I didn't care. I was drowning in my own grief, my own rage, and I needed answers. The next few days passed in slow motion. The paternity test arrived, and Jake and I did the swabs in silence. He didn't touch me. He didn't even try. I mailed it back and then spent the next week avoiding him. He tried to talk, but what was there to say? Every time I looked at him, all I saw was betrayal, not just from him, but from his entire family, his brother. Then, the results came in. Jake opened the email first. I stood across the room, arms crossed over my chest, barely breathing. His eyes scanned the screen, and then he let out a sharp exhale. When he looked up at me, his face crumbled. "They're mine," he whispered. I let out a shaky breath, the relief overwhelming. But it didn't change the past. Jake must have seen it in my face, because he stepped closer. "Lena, I know this doesn't fix everything, but please, I love you. I love our family. We can get through this." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach dropped. It was Ryan. "Ryan, Lena, please talk to me. I can't stop thinking about what happened. I made a mistake, but I never stopped loving you. I need to see you." My hands shook as I stared at the message. I felt Jake step closer. "Who is it?" I locked the phone, my pulse racing. "No one." Jake frowned, sensing something was off. "Lena, who just texted you?" I hesitated for just a second too long. And that was when I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. I locked my phone, shoving it into my pocket as if the message itself could burn me. Jake's eyes darkened. "Lena, who was that?" I hesitated. Lying wasn't something I did, especially not to my husband. Not before all of this. But everything was different now. I turned away, heading toward the stairs. "It doesn't matter." His hand caught my wrist. "It does matter." His grip wasn't tight, but his voice was pleading. "Lena, after everything we've been through, after the fact that my brother—" He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. "Please, don't shut me out." I looked at him then, and for the first time in days, I didn't just see betrayal. I saw fear. Fear of losing me. Fear that no matter what the test had confirmed, our marriage was still slipping through his fingers. But he didn't know what I knew. He didn't know that Ryan had just confessed something far worse. Not only had he stolen my wedding night, he claimed he had feelings for me. I pulled my wrist from Jake's grasp, my voice quiet but firm. "I need time." Jake searched my face, his expression unreadable. "Time for what?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked upstairs and shut the bedroom door behind me. I stared at Ryan's message for an hour. My mind ran in circles. "I never stopped loving you." Had I missed something all these years? Were there moments where Ryan looked at me that way and I had just brushed it off? Had every interaction we'd ever had been laced with something I was too blind to see? I knew one thing for sure. I had to put an end to this. I texted back. "Me? We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow." The dots appeared immediately. "Ryan, I'll be there. You won't regret this, Lena." I already did. The next afternoon, I met Ryan at a coffee shop across town. I didn't want to risk Jake seeing us together, didn't want to deal with what would happen if he did. Ryan looked different. Less cocky. More desperate. He stood when I approached. "Lena." I sat across from him, ignoring the way my stomach turned at the sound of my name coming from his mouth. "Why did you text me that?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because it's true." I shook my head, rage and disbelief warring inside me. "Ryan, what you did wasn't love. It was sick. It was selfish. It ruined me." His jaw tightened. "I know, and I hate myself for it. But, Lena, I meant what I said." I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean to tell me that for the last 7 years you've been in love with me? While watching me raise a family with your brother? While standing by as I married him?" Ryan leaned forward, his voice low. "I didn't plan on falling for you, but I did. And the second I knew I loved you, I knew I could never have you." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "So what? You stole one night with me because you knew that's all you'd ever get?" Ryan looked away, ashamed. "I was drunk. I was angry. And I was stupid." "Stupid doesn't even begin to cover it," I spat. "You don't love me, Ryan. You don't even know what love is. If you did, you would have never done this to me." He looked at me then, something raw in his expression. "And yet, here you are, meeting me, alone." A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my purse and stood. "We're done, Ryan. Don't ever contact me again." I turned to leave. But before I could take a step, Ryan grabbed my wrist. "Wait." His grip was firm, his voice urgent. "There's something else you need to know." I yanked my arm away. "I don't want to hear it." You do, he insisted. His next words made my blood run cold. Jake knew. I froze. Ryan continued, his voice quiet and unshakable. He knew years ago. Maybe not right away, but I told him. I confessed, and he chose to stay quiet. I shook my head, my breath catching in my throat. You're lying. Am I? Ryan's eyes searched mine. Think about it, Lena. Really think. You told him the truth, and he didn't even seem surprised, did he? The coffee shop around me blurred. No, this couldn't be real. Jake wouldn't do that to me, would he? I turned and walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to go home. I needed to confront my husband. Because if what Ryan said was true, I had spent 7 years married to a man who had lied to me just as much as his brother had. The drive home felt endless. My mind raced through every moment I had ever shared with Jake, every time I had confided in him, every time he had reassured me that our love was real. Had it all been a lie? When I pulled into the driveway, Jake was already waiting on the porch, his arms crossed, tension written all over his face. He knew. I stepped out of the car, gripping my keys so tightly my nails dug into my palm. I didn't say a word as I climbed the steps. I could see the way his jaw was clenched, the storm brewing behind his eyes. You went to see him, he said, his voice low. I dropped my bag on the porch. Yeah. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Lena, I cut him off. Did you know? He hesitated, and in that moment, I knew the truth. Oh my God. My voice broke. You did. You knew. Jake's eyes snapped up to mine. Lena, it's not what you think. Don't, I hissed. Don't try to spin this. How long have you known? He opened his mouth, then shut it, looking away. The guilt on his face said everything. I took a shaky breath, my whole body trembling. You knew Ryan took your place, and you still let me believe I spent my wedding night with you. He winced. I didn't want to believe it, but you did. And instead of telling me, instead of giving me the truth, you buried it. I took a step closer, my voice barely above a whisper. You let me build a life with you, while knowing that my first night as your wife was with your brother. Jake's face crumbled. I was scared, Lena. I thought if I told you, I'd lose you. And I couldn't risk that. I let out a hollow laugh. So you let me live in ignorance? You let me sleep next to you every night, raise children with you, love you, while you carried that secret. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I thought it didn't matter. I thought as long as we were happy. Happy? My voice cracked. You think I would have married you if I had known the truth? You think I would have carried your children, built a life with you? Jake took a step forward, desperation in his eyes. But we are happy, Lena. Despite everything, we built something real. We love each other. I shook my head, feeling the tears sting my eyes. You don't lie to someone you love like this, Jake. You don't keep something this big from them. He looked at me then, and I saw it. The realization that he had already lost me. Tears burned down my cheeks. You let me live in a fantasy, Jake. And now, I don't know what's real anymore. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Lena, please. I need space, I said, my voice hollow. He flinched. Lena, don't. I turned and walked into the house, leaving him standing there on the porch. My entire marriage had been a lie, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive him for it. I locked myself in the bedroom, my back pressed against the door as my breath came in shaky bursts. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Jake had known. Maybe not at first, maybe not immediately, but at some point, he had figured it out. And instead of telling me, he had chosen to pretend, to let me believe that our wedding night, the night that was supposed to be sacred, had been real. I thought I had been betrayed by one man, but I had been betrayed by both of them. A soft knock at the door. Lena. I closed my eyes. Go away. Please, Jake's voice cracked. Just talk to me. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and forced myself to stay strong. There's nothing to talk about. I heard him exhale sharply. Lena, I love you. I love our kids. I didn't tell you because I was terrified of losing you. I let out a hollow laugh, wiping angrily at my tears. And now you've lost me anyway. Silence. I waited, listening to his breathing on the other side of the door. Then, finally, I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't have a full plan. I didn't know if I was leaving for a night, a week, or forever. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not while I felt like this. When I walked downstairs, Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee. His eyes were bloodshot, his face hollowed from lack of sleep. He looked up and immediately tensed when he saw the bag slung over my shoulder. Lena, I need time, I said quietly. His hands curled into fists. So you're just leaving? I swallowed. I don't know what else to do. He pushed back his chair, standing quickly. Lena, please. I held up a hand. Don't. My voice broke. Just don't. His face crumpled, but he didn't try to stop me. As I walked toward the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, but then something told me to check. I pulled it out. My blood ran cold. It was Ryan. Ryan, Lena, I need to see you. There's something I haven't told you yet. I let out a shaking breath. I was so sick of secrets, so sick of lies. And yet, I knew I had no choice. I had to see him, because whatever he was hiding, it was going to change everything. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at Ryan's message. There's something I haven't told you yet. I wanted to ignore him. I wanted to throw my phone out the window and never look back. But deep down I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I drove to Ryan's apartment, my stomach twisting with every mile. When I knocked, he answered almost immediately, like he'd been waiting by the door. Lena, he breathed, his eyes scanning my face. You look like you haven't slept. I pushed past him, stepping inside. Just tell me what you need to say. Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know you hate me. Hate doesn't even begin to cover it. He winced but nodded. Fair. But there's something you need to know. Something about Jake? I froze. What? Ryan swallowed hard. I wasn't the only one keeping a secret. My heart slammed against my ribs. Ryan, what are you talking about? He exhaled sharply. That night, our wedding night, I wasn't the only one lying to you. He hesitated, then looked me in the eyes. Jake knew the next morning. My breath hitched. No. Ryan nodded. He remembered. At first, he was confused, but then things started clicking for him. And when he confronted me, I told him the truth. Everything. He wanted to kill me, but in the end, he made a choice. I took a step back, shaking my head. No. He told me he only suspected. He lied to you, Lena. Ryan's voice was firm. He knew, and he chose to let it go. He chose to let you believe that night was real because he was too scared of losing you. The room spun. Jake had known. Not for a few years. Not as a vague suspicion, but from the beginning. I pressed a hand to my stomach, nausea rolling through me. You're lying. Ryan shook his head. I wish I was. Tears burned in my eyes. I had spent years, living in a lie. And the one person I thought I could still trust had been deceiving me from the start. I turned toward the door. Lena, wait. Ryan grabbed my wrist. What are you going to do? I yanked my arm away. What I should have done a long time ago. When I got home, Jake was in the living room, his head in his hands. When he looked up and saw me, relief flashed across his face. Lena, thank God. He stood quickly. I was so scared you weren't coming back. I held up a hand. Don't. He froze. Lena. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice was steady. You knew. His face paled. What? Don't. My voice cracked. Ryan told me everything. Jake took a shaky step forward. Lena, please. I let out a choked laugh. You let me live a lie. You let me love you, have your children, all while knowing the truth. My voice broke. How could you do that to me? He looked at me helplessly. Because I love you. Because I knew if I told you, I'd lose you. I wiped my tears away angrily. You lost me anyway. He took another step closer. Lena, please. We can fix this. We can. I shook my head. No, we can't. Jake's face twisted in pain. So what now? I exhaled shakily. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Jake's body sagged, like all the fight drained from him at once. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Lena. I turned toward the stairs. I'll be packing my things tomorrow. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might have broken. But I couldn't break anymore. I had already lost too much. Epilogue. It's been 6 months. The divorce is in progress. Jake begged me to go to therapy, to give us another chance, but there was nothing left to save. I moved into my own place with the kids, and for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe again. Ryan tried reaching out a few times, but I blocked him. I want nothing to do with either of them. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't fade. And sometimes, the person you love the most is the one who deceives you the worst. But I'm free now, and I'll never let anyone take that from me again.